Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So excited to be here with you all for the superintendent's mid-year update. My name is Wesley Pierre, and I am joined tonight with Dr. Elizabeth Hopen, our superintendent, and Dr. Mona Ford Walker, our deputy superintendent. So, Dr. Hopen, please take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is the first time we've done an update like this. We are going to be recording it, right, Miss Pierre? And do we need to hit record? Okay, great.
We are recording. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So we are recording and we're going to send this out to everyone when we're done. And we'll post it to the website too and to some of our other feeds so that folks, if you're joining us live, that's great. We're glad you're here with us this evening. If you're not able to join live, but you're listening to the recording, then fantastic. Thank you for listening to the recording. And so for this first version of a superintendent's update, which we're hoping to do a little bit more frequently moving forward, we're going to spend a few minutes just saying hello and talking about a little bit about who we are and what we're going to be doing this evening. And then I'd like to share a few wins that we have from the school year so far this year and some areas of future growth, things that we're thinking about as we begin to build our goals for the 2024-25 school year. Believe it or not, it's the end of March, but we're already thinking about that. And I'd like to share, and we'd like to share a couple of strategic initiatives that are tied to our strategic plan and also to the Student Opportunity Act, which we're required to submit updates on to the state routinely. So Ms. Pierre and Dr. Ford Walker will be sharing some specific initiatives that we're working on this year. And from there, we're going to take it to some questions that we received earlier from the community. I will share that I don't love talking into a void all that much, and I don't love just talking at people all that much either. But we're going to do both tonight, and we're going to think about, we're doing a trial run, and we'll think about ways to make this more interactive in the future. So tonight we're not going to take live Q&A while we get used to this format and getting used to doing this, but maybe in the future we'll be able to do some more interactive components. We are going to use the questions that folks wrote in ahead of time to answer some of your questions, and there were some themes in those questions, so we're looking forward to answering those. As Ms. Pierre said, I am Dr. Elizabeth Homan. I'm the superintendent of schools, a very proud superintendent of the Arlington Public Schools. Dr. Ford Walker, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good evening. I am Dr. Mona Ford Walker, Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, and I'm so happy that you're here this evening and look forward to sharing some updates with you a little later.
And Ms. Pierre, I know you got to start it, but I don't know if you introduced yourself.
I think I kind of did, but I'm Wesley Pierre. I'm the Director of Communications and Family Engagement for the district. Happy to be here.
All right. So also joining us on the call are a number of our senior team members. And I know Dr. Creedle Thomas, newly minted Dr. Creedle Thomas, is on the call with us as well. She is our Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Justice. What you can see on the screen is, first of all, one of our incredible first grade classrooms engaging with our new curriculum, which we'll talk about a little bit tonight. And all the way to the right, the senior leadership team, which includes some of us who are here, as well as Allison Elmer, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. Mr. Mason recently took an incredible new role as the Deputy City Manager in Chelsea, and so we'll be hiring a new Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, and Mr. Spiegel, who is our Director of Human Resources. And so that's the senior team that leads the district, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we're all focusing on this year. So I want to give a little bit of an overview of what we're up to in 2023-24 first. We are in year one of strategic plan implementation. I know families have heard a lot about the plan itself for the last couple of years, actually, but we actually are only in year one of actually making this thing go. We launched our strategic plan working groups. These are community groups that include faculty members, students, families, as well as administration. And the goal of the groups, and I'll talk about them a little bit more, is to make sure that the strategic plan stays alive and that we're constantly doing the work of it and it's not sitting on a shelf gathering dust. We are expanding and continuing the work of improving shared leadership structures and initiatives, doing district-wide professional development, making sure that we are creating leadership opportunities for our educators so that if they want to move through the system into new roles and opportunities, they have the opportunity to do that as a retention strategy. We've launched our new EL Education elementary literacy curriculum, and we've opened phase 2 of the new Arlington High School, and we continue working on that project. So we'll talk a little more about all of these this evening. I do want to ground our discussion in the Arlington Public Schools strategic priorities that are part of our strategic plan. We have 4 major priority areas, and we budget around these, and we plan around these, and we make decisions using these all day, every day when we are working as an administrative team and when we're working with our staff and our students. So the first priority area is ensuring equity and excellence. This is highly focused on teaching and learning. We have a focus in the Arlington Public Schools on deeper learning, which is learning that integrates social emotional opportunities for learning and interpersonal learning, learning how to cooperate with your peers, learning how to engage in rich discussions and discourse around content, but while also centering the content itself, opportunities for students to experience the content as learners and scholars. So that's priority area 1. Priority area 2 is valuing all staff. This is focused on recruitment, retention, and making sure that our staff have absolutely everything they need in order to feel the sense of growth, joy, and belonging that we also want for all of our students. Priority area 3 is focused on infrastructure, operations, and sustainability, with priorities in there linking to everything from making sure that our facilities are inclusive and include accessibility technologies to making sure they are safe and modern and sustainable, to making sure that our students have all of the meals that they need and that those are high quality as well. So that one has a whole bunch of the things that sort of go around teaching and learning to make it great. And then our last priority area is sustaining collaborative partnerships. This priority area is really focused on building our 2-way communication with families, and we'll talk about ways we're doing that a little bit later. Key to the strategic plan is our focus on our focal groups. And these are groups that we've identified as groups that have been traditionally marginalized by public school systems, groups that deserve a little more attention when we're thinking about the services that we provide for students, making sure that any services we provide are provided to our focal groups at a level that ensures that they can accelerate so that we can close gaps. And those are opportunity gaps as well as achievement gaps. Achievement gaps, we talk about them a lot, but they're actually too late to do anything about. So what we want to make sure we're doing is paying attention to where these groups might lose an opportunity because of circumstances in the schools or the way our schools are set up, or because of systemic or structural barriers, and make sure that we're creating more engagement, enrichment, and academic opportunities for all of our students. And the goal of focal groups is not to say we're only going to focus on certain groups. It's actually to say that when we raise the bar for groups of students who have been traditionally marginalized, we actually raise the bar for all students. And really importantly, and I'll talk about this in a bit, closing achievement gaps does not mean lowering standards or limiting opportunities for any students at all. You want to see when you close a gap that all groups are rising. And so I'll share a little bit about our work in that area as we go. So I want to start by sharing a few wins that we have this year. Beginning with the beginning, this is something that we shared with the school committee earlier in the fall. And I want to just say a little bit about what this shows. So this is our accountability rating as a district. Our accountability ratings are calculated by the state every year based on performance against targets for all students and subgroups. And the state uses lots of different metrics to determine how a district is doing. And so they will use certainly state tests, MCAS growth and achievement, but that's not the only thing they're looking at. And I actually like the state's accountability system because it looks at more factors than just test scores. And we know that you don't understand what a student can do or know just from a test score. So it looks at MCAS growth and achievement, yes, but it also scores us based on levels of chronic absenteeism or presence in school. It looks at different subgroups, the focal groups I just named, and it rates us based on how we're closing gaps for those focal groups. So our strategic plan is aligned with how the state rates our progress. It looks at graduation rates and post-graduation data as well, and advanced coursework completion, particularly at the high school level. It looks at the degree to which multilingual learners are learning English and the rate with which they're learning English. So there's lots of other factors that are also factored into our accountability rating. The great news is that Arlington Public Schools received the highest rating that a district can receive. Our accountability designation was that we are meeting or exceeding targets set by the state, rigorous targets set by the state. The schools of recognition is the only higher rating that a school can receive, but districts, there's no district of recognition. So this is the highest rating that a district can receive based on its accountability data. And this year we did quite well. And I'll share a little bit more about that here. Not only did we do quite well as a district, but our individual schools also did exceptionally well this year. Our schools made significant progress towards our improvement targets. That's this column, and it's basically a percentage that says, you know, we set targets for you relative to those targets. How have you progressed as a school system? All of our schools above 60% is very strong because it means all of our schools are making progress towards their targets or meeting or exceeding targets. Our accountability percentiles is a ranking against other schools in the state. And what you will notice there is that all of our schools are in the 84th percentile or higher, which is excellent. So the great news is that on those scores that the state takes, which are based on, like I said, a lot more than just test scores, the Arlington Public Schools is performing well, and the state is measuring against our ability to close some of those opportunity gaps. I want to share some of the data from our panorama survey, and I'm just taking a quick look at the time. I'm speaking fast because we have a lot to share, and we can't possibly share it all. So I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of some of the climate and culture data that we received in fall of 2023. And we're always, of course, happy to take additional questions if this raises something for you and you'd like to know a little more in future webinars, then we're happy to do that. So we have been tracking belonging, and what I'm going to share is data from large categories of questions, banks of questions that we ask our students. And sense of belonging is one of those banks of questions. So there are lots of different questions within that bank of questions around sense of belonging. But overall, we've been tracking this large category because this is a key component of our vision for the district, and our strategic plan is to improve students' sense that they feel seen, they feel understood as a human being, that they feel fully supported by the people around them every day, and that they can be their full human selves. And we are seeing improvement in this area. Particularly, this is the graph for grades 6 through 12. We're also seeing improvement in grades 3 through 5 over the past several years. Our focus on this has included everything from doing interviews with students, particularly interviews with students in our focal groups, but really interviews with all of our kids to ask them, what does belonging look like? And then to take their tips and put them into action. When they tell us that something, this will really work for me, or when we see students feeling really empowered, trying to do those things that we think that will make them feel empowered, and then that will improve their sense of connection to school and their sense of belonging. So we're making some progress in this area. It's not groundbreaking progress. We've gone from 46 to 51%, but it's definitely a trend in the right direction. Whoops, skipped one. One area that we're really proud of is tied to our excellence and equity priority, and that is in rigorous expectation. So again, this is a bank of questions. We ask a lot of questions within this bank, things like, you know, how often does your teacher make you explain your answers? And how often does your teacher encourage you to try again if you're stuck on something, or come back to you and sort of help you persevere through a challenge that you're experiencing in class? Those are examples of some of the questions that are in this category. And our students are telling us that increasingly they feel they're held to a high expectation. And that's great because we really want all students to feel challenged. We know that students feel joy at school. They feel belonging when they feel challenged, when they feel seen as an academic, or as an excellent thinker, or as an excellent athlete. Like these, when you're held to a high standard, you can excel. So this is something that we're really aiming at, keeping a very close eye on, and really excited to see improvement around for all of our grade levels across the board. And then another win, and we're sharing the 6 to 12 data. These trends map to grades 3 to 5 data as well. They're not just 6 through 12 trends, but we wanted to share a few examples with you. So this is the school climate data. In particular for grades 6 through 12, this has improved more than grades 3 to 5. 3 to 5 has been stable and positive, but what we've seen is a percent favorable rating and I'll explain what that means in a sec. That's gone from 52% to 60% for our secondary schools. And this is significant because often on surveys like this, ratings of school climate will be lower in secondary schools than in elementary schools. And there are all sorts of reasons for this. It's a true thing to say nationally, like on surveys like this. Nationally, generally, secondary schools will rate lower. But it's still concerning. We want students to feel connected to school even as they move through their adolescent and teenage years. And so we're really encouraged to see that as we've expanded access to extracurriculars, as we've added no-cut sports to the high school, as we have expanded access to fine arts programming, that we're also seeing students report an improvement in school climate over the past several years. So these are all great news items. But lest you think we only look at graphs, because we don't, I want to share a few wonderful things that we're doing that are a little more qualitative, but a lot of fun to think about. We have strategic plan working groups that I mentioned earlier. This is the working group that's focused on professional development. It's made up of mostly teachers and administrators who give professional development. It's part of priority area 2 around competitive compensation and reimagine professional development for valuing all staff. These are all the working groups in this graphic here. These are all the different groups and what they're focused on. They're all focused on an initiative or 2 that's part of the strategic plan. And these working groups get together once a month. If you recall, I sent a message out in, I think, December to the entire community, inviting community members to apply to be on a working group. We will do another round if we have vacancies to fill those vacancies as we head into next school year. And so if this is something you're interested in getting involved in, there will be further opportunities to do so. And these working groups really are inquiry cycle groups. You see the arrows that go in a circle around each of the initiatives. And that's because what these groups do is they think about something in that area that they can change and shift now that's aligned with the actions in the strategic plan. And they go within their spheres of influence and control, and they in their role, and they go and try to make change happen now. And then they study how that goes and they bring it back to the group. And we're hoping that these groups moving forward will be able to make recommendations around budget priorities, that they'll help us make recommendations around shifts to models when it comes to things like schedules, when it comes to things like furnishings in classrooms, all sorts of aspects of the educational environment that are aligned with our vision. So these groups have been wonderful to work with. They're just getting started on some of their action initiation, and you should see some things shift as they start to experiment with ways that we can improve our school systems from within. We also have lots of other examples of growth, joy, and belonging across the schools. There's our opening of the Menotomy Preschool, which is just below our brand new offices and central office right here. Our students in grade 1 and here in grade 2, I think, pretty sure it's either grade 2 or 3, and using our new curriculum resources and engaging in conversations, using protocols. These are our administrators learning from our students a dance that they performed on opening day. So we had students teaching administrators, their former principals, how to dance. That was quite fun and funny at times. And here are Pierce school choir at one of their concerts recently. So we paid very close attention to those moments of joy that happen in the schools, try to document them and celebrate them as often as we can. And we like to tell those stories as wins as well. Also this year, we have opened phase 2 of the new Arlington High School, and we are in the process of building phase 3. Phase 3 of that construction is underway, and that includes the new athletic wing, some physical education spaces, and a black box theater, some outdoor spaces that the students will enjoy, Arlington Community Education spaces, as well as spaces for the Lab Collaborative, which is a special education collaborative that's housed within the Arlington Public Schools. We are members of that collaborative along with a number of other local districts. The phase 3 schedule and phase 2 schedules have shifted a bit, and they will open in February of 2025. And then phase 4 includes the field. So phase 3 is the end of the building, and then phase 4 includes some of the build out of the outdoor spaces and the fields and final site work. So we're really enjoying the new space. The kids, the students have their classes almost fully in the new phase 1 and 2 buildings. The only classes that they still don't have are PE classes, where they go into the former Downs House building, and it's just been really wonderful to hear the kids talk about what a shift it feels like it is in their space and in their learning experience as a result of the new building. So we want to thank all of you for the support that has resulted in the ability to build a space like this, because really it is the town of Arlington's support for its schools and the support of taxpayers that has enabled us to be in such a beautiful space. So we also realize that while we have some great stuff going on, we have opportunities to learn and grow always. So I want to share a few of the things that we're tracking in the data, paying very close attention to, and thinking about, reflecting on, and trying to make some shifts to adjust. And then I will be turning it over to my friends to share some specific initiatives that we're working on. So one of the things that we track very closely, it's in the strategic plan, it's presented to the school committee at the beginning of each year, our achievement gaps. This is something that Arlington's been working on for a long time. This graph is showing the achievement gap between our students who are identified as high needs, which groups a number of our focal groups together. So the high needs subgroup that the state tracks is actually a mix of different focal groups from our focal groups, which includes students who have IEPs, students who are multilingual learners, students who might come from low-income households. And so that high needs group is one that many of our schools track because their numbers might be too low to track some of those other focal groups really closely in academic data. And what this is showing is that in grades 3 to 5 ELA, from 2022 to 23, we have a gap that remained absolutely stable. It didn't close. It didn't get wider, and we really want to see these gaps begin to close. And what that means is that we want to see both lines go up, but we want to see that bottom line accelerate towards the top line. So we really need to think about, what is the experience that our students who have additional needs in the classroom are having? How are they getting access to rigorous instruction with all of their peers? And so how can we accelerate their learning with additional supports up towards that of their peers so that the challenges that they have don't preclude a challenge with achievement. So this is an example of how we track some of that academic data and an area of concern for us. So we're really excited about the new ELA curriculum because we think that will turn around some of the experiences of our students with additional needs. And we realize that we might need to change some other structures in addition to that. We're not just counting on one change to help us with this challenge. This is the trend in grades 6 through 8 ELA. And as you can see, this is actually an example of a gap that is widening. We had a trend downwards from 2022 to 2023 in middle school ELA. So this is something that we're thinking about and interrogating. We know that shifts at the elementary level will have an impact here, but we also know that what this means that we need to think about our structures for providing support to students at the middle level when it comes to reaching the literacy demands. And this is not, and I also want to point out, we're pointing out ELA data here, but literacy spans the content areas. And so this is something that we want to think about holistically as an entire school system. And then this is panorama data. So this is coming from our climate and culture surveys. And what this is demonstrating is a trend that we are getting really curious about. Dr. Thomas and I have spoken about this at length. Members of our senior leadership team are thinking about why is it that we're seeing a downward trend from students and families when it comes to cultural awareness and action, and when it comes to our family school relationships. And these are a couple of the questions that are asked in these categories. How often do teachers encourage you to learn about people from different races, ethnicities, or cultures? How well does your school help students speak out against racism? And we recognize that it's okay if students say, sometimes this happens or sometimes this goes well. We want to understand what it looks like when it goes well. And if we see a downward trend in this, we want to interrogate why. And what we're seeing, particularly in this area, and what we're thinking about is how the broader culture and some conversations that the society is having, that members of our community are having about these issues can have a big impact on how teachers address or approach challenges when they come up in class, as well as how we respond when students might bring it up at home. And so we'd like to think with the community about how to address some of the trends that we're seeing here. I also want to name and show you all some of the trends that we can see behind the scenes when we really dig into the panorama data. So I showed some big picture, like rigorous expectations and belonging are improving. But when we take a look at rigorous expectations, for example, and then we look at the focal groups, what we see is that we have gaps there too. And these are opportunities that we have to make a change throughout the year, because we do these surveys multiple times a year, whereas the MCAS data, that's going to be very lagging, and we're not going to know until the students are in the next grade level that there's a gap. And so we really value these data because they tell us for a particular grade level or for a particular school. Schools can look at their specific data as well. You know, are my students who have an IEP feeling like they're not held to the same level of expectation? Are my students of color feeling like they're not held to the same level of expectation as their peers? And if that's the case, then there are specific interventions that we can take a look at, tied to how we're scheduling or placing students, tied to our own practice and how we're addressing students in the classroom. And these are things that we want to think more about with educators and with our staff, so that we can create interventions that'll make a difference here. So these are questions that, example questions that are in the rigorous expectations question set. And then this is the graph that shows the cultural awareness and action data and the trend over the past few years. So we saw a pretty significant dip in this, which is something that we want to look at. We also had higher participation in the most recent survey than we've ever had. And so it's possible that we received a better baseline for what folks are feeling in the community when we did this most recent survey, because we surveyed more people. And so we want to keep an eye on this, see if we can turn this trend around and think about how we are talking about and providing space for students to safely discuss issues of race, ethnicity, and culture. This is for grades 6 through 12. These are all our older students telling us that they don't feel like they always have an opportunity to discuss and confront issues of race, ethnicity, and culture in school in a way that feels supportive. And then this is another trend we're watching very carefully, and we have an initiative around this that we'll talk about in just a minute. We have this one thing that is notable about these data in particular is that there's a question in this question set that is pulling this result down, that's tied to COVID communication specifically. And so we've talked to our survey provider about whether or not we can eliminate that question. So it's probably a slightly exaggerated dip, but it is one that concerns us, because we want our families to feel like communication has been strong and that the school values the opinions that we receive. And so we're working on ways to improve two-way communication with families and to build strategies for doing that, all the way from central administration, and I'll talk about some of those, to the school level. So here are some of the things. These are just a few of the things that we're doing to address some of those growth opportunities. And then I will pass it off to Ms. Pierre and Dr. Ford Walker to talk about in more depth, two really specific things that we're working on right now. We're working on the creation of a community DEI task force. Dr. Thomas is working on that, and we'll have a call out soon for folks who want to participate in that, to express their interest. We've continued the LGBTQIA+ task force that held some excellent events for our families, for all of our community members last year. Dr. Ford Walker is the liaison to that community group. We're engaging with students in affinity groups, particularly when things come up. As a matter of fact, I know that this has happened this week, when things come up that require students to process challenging moments in class, or when we have an opportunity to do some learning, and we know that it might work better if we do some of that learning in affinity spaces where you can be with people who identify similarly to you, and then you can go and process it with the whole class. We do that. We're continuing the rollout, like I said, of the early literacy, elementary literacy curriculum, not early literacy. We have an early literacy curriculum, but we're continuing the rollout of the elementary literacy curriculum and early literacy screeners and communication about those screeners. We are expanding access to advanced coursework at the secondary level, doing everything we can to get as many students access to AP courses as we can. And we saw a significant improvement in that last year, which is very exciting. And we're trying to expand opportunities for members of district staff to connect directly with staff, families, and students through forums like this one. I am doing staff office hours with our staff at every school this year, and also have started a student advisory committee made up of the students who are in our working groups. And so they come see me every month, and we talk about what deeper learning looks like and what growth and belonging and joy at school look like. And then they make recommendations that can then go back out to the working groups to advise on what change would make a real difference for their experience as students. And then we're also expanding opportunities for parents to engage with us and doing more parent forums this school year. So hopefully you've seen some evidence of some of those adjustments that we're trying to make as a system. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time for them to be visible to everybody, but I hope you've seen evidence of some of that work. And I believe with that, I'll be passing it off. So we're going to talk about 2 focal initiatives among many that are the ones that we are specifically submitting for the Student Opportunity Act to the state, but are also tied to the work of our strategic plan. So I believe I'm passing it off first to you, Ms. Pierre.
Thank you so much for kicking us off. That was great. So the section that I'm going to be discussing is how we have been working as a district to engage families as partners in our work. It's really important that parents, families, guardians, caregivers, everyone feels like their cultures, values, and kind of how they feel is implemented into the day-to-day of their students. So we've partnered with families through our monthly newsletters and in sharing out information about all the things that are happening in the district and in the community. We've recently launched our new APS Family Welcome Center, which is right in our district office. Our hours are 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, and you can walk in at any time to get resources, to say hi, grab a coffee. And it's a really great place to connect and where families who need extra support with registration walk right in and get support. Our family engagement team has been meeting quarterly with PTO leads and giving them a chance to connect with each other around the different initiatives at each of their schools. We are working actively to expand, as Dr. Holman said earlier, to expand our family forums and learning opportunities in partnership with parent-facing organizations like the CPAC and the MLPAC. We've recently launched our Pocket Talk translators, which is a device that we'll be using to help support and close up the language barrier to help with families that whose English isn't their first language. We have a new device that helps with that communication. So every school building will be getting one. We're working on really diversifying our communication methods. So even for this forum, it went out in the family newsletter, emails, text, hounded everyone so that they had the information they need to get there. The Welcome Center and Communications Working Group is working really hard. We have students, administrators, teachers, and family members on that working group, and we are working on figuring out what are the best ways to communicate and make sure everybody's voice is heard. And we do want to plug, and we'll plug this multiple times today, that we are working with the town side on launching an Arlington Community Connections Fair, and that's going to be Sunday, the 28th of April at the high school. So that's it for me, and I'll be passing it on to Dr. Ford Walker.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to just be sharing a little bit around our implementation process and also some next steps around the implementation process for the new elementary literacy curriculum that we have started to use this year. So I just want to start off by giving a little bit of a historical perspective in terms of how we got to this particular point. So last spring, APS completed a comprehensive review of state recommended literacy programs. And this process included various stakeholders, and that group concluded with a recommendation for use of the EL education curriculum. And beginning this past fall, in fall 2023, APS began implementing the EL education curriculum. It's currently being used at 2 grade levels at each of our elementary schools. And some of our early successes include improved student engagement. Educators are reporting that they're noticing that students are more deeply engaged in the content and that there is a high interest in content. Also, while at the same time, students are experiencing greater access to more challenging content. Also, another early success is that the ability for students to make more authentic connections to real world content is something that educators are seeing more of. And also, in addition to that, educators have noticed an improvement in student writing skills. And again, these are just some early successes, early wins that we're noticing. But in general, I'd say that as with any new curriculum that's being rolled out, there are some challenges that we're also facing and that we are also trying to be super responsive about. And some of those include, in particular, the new curriculum comes with a large number of materials and a large um, resource, um, a large number of resources. And it's been pretty challenging for our educators to develop their own systems for how to work through all of that curriculum in a timely manner. And so folks are working really hard to figure out structures and systems to better to support them in being able to really work through the materials and preparing the materials for lessons. Also, another challenge that we've encountered is that earlier in this year, we had a professional development provider that really wasn't meeting the needs of our cohort 1 teachers. And so we made a shift in the middle of the year to a different provider, and that provider is the creator of the curriculum, EL Education. And so with that shift, we've experienced more positive interactions as it relates to professional development, but it's still something that we're trying to iron out and still trying to work on. Our classroom teachers, special educators, multilingual learner educators, principals, and some of our assistant principals are currently participating in a professional development series. The sessions are designed to help educators learn more about the philosophy of the curriculum and also learn more about how to implement the curriculum. It's also an opportunity for teams to begin to build a community of practice within and across grade levels and also across the district. Educators and leaders have participated in classroom observations and walkthroughs, and the purpose of these has been to really provide an opportunity to reflect on implementation at each school, identify trends that exist, and also norm on look-fors, and identify best practices and lessons learned, particularly in the spirit of sharing those with our cohort 2 educators who will be implementing next year. Also, we're working on offering more opportunities for staff to participate in professional development, training, curriculum preparation throughout this spring and also throughout the summer. We're actively planning for a full district implementation beginning in the fall of 2024. So as I mentioned, we're really trying to highlight some of the best practices from this year and also some of the areas that we know we need to really be mindful of addressing and shifting. We'll also continue to offer professional development opportunities, as I said, during the summer and also throughout next school year as well. And finally, in the larger district-wide rollout, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing the sharing of best practices and developing a community of practice really across the district, educator to educator and leader to leader. Currently, I'm excited that I've been able to engage in more opportunities where I've been able to speak directly to educators who are currently implementing the curriculum and gathering feedback and using that and using the information from our literacy coaches to help work on identifying needs and structures and systems that need to be in place so that we can have a successful rollout next year. And that is it for me.
We are moving into Q&A. Wow, we did a great job. So the Q&A was pulled directly from the forms. Some of the questions had to be kind of adjusted for language. Some of the questions were similar, so we like merged them together, but they'll be pasted and we'll answer them. First one is about food services and equity in food services, and Dr. Creedle Thomas is joining us to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pierre.
Just in case, wait,
Sorry.
just, am I muted? I don't know. No?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. Just in case anyone is just listening, should we read the question all the way through?
Yes, I was going to read the question.
Yes,
Perfect.
great idea.
First question is, how is APS planning to increase the equity in food options at APS? What is the process of selection of vegetarian options that are served at APS? And this is in conjunction, the answer came from our Director of Food Services, Denise. In addition, the department is committed to making the vegetarian options more readily identifiable by noting that the vegetarian options both on the monthly menu as well as the daily at schools. It has been noted that some students are uncomfortable asking for a modified meal, and we want to ease these concerns and have the vegetarian meals easily identifiable. As always, please reach out to the Food and Nutrition Office to share feedback, requests, and any other questions that you might have. We want all students to feel included and have a positive lunch experience.
Can I add to that answer a little bit?
Yeah, I was gonna read a little bit more, but go ahead.
Okay, no, keep going. I didn't know you had more.
Yeah. So the other thing is I kind of missed some things. The other thing is the district has received previous feedback from students, which led to the district increasing hot vegetarian options of some of the most popular items, including veggie-based chicken, veggie-based hot dogs, black beans, and garden veggie burgers, vegetarian chili, and tofu choices. Many of the daily choices have vegetarian options, such as pasta without meatballs, eggs without meat, etc. Specifically, daily choices at Audison have been included in the sun butter and jelly, pizza options, bagel, cereal options, and salad. The nutrition department attended Civics Day at Audison last week and will be convening a group of students to help survey the school around the lunch experience, including food options. Please have your students be on the lookout for the information to play an active role in this process. And I think that was it. Over to you, Dr. Holman.
The Civics Day thing is cool. I didn't know that we had a civics project around food and nutrition.
Yeah.
We also have a working group that's focused on food and nutrition, and we sent out in one of the recent superintendent's updates the list of folks who are on the working groups. If you know any of those people, you are welcome to reach out to those that are on that working group. And if you want to be involved in making some shifts when it comes to food and nutrition, I know they're looking for people to talk to. Or if you send an inquiry to my office, the superintendent at Arlington Public School, arlington.k12.ma.us, I think, the superintendent email, we can forward also to the working group and just have that for them to use as feedback. So the other avenues for sharing input on this topic if you want to. Okay, next one. I think this
Great. This is me. So will digital learning and literacy receive more funding next year? So the goal is to expand our program and ensure that there is a librarian in every school. But currently our fiscal constraints going into next year will not allow us to meet this goal for next year. But we are prioritizing this as the budget allows. And if funding does become available, this is one of our top areas or one of our top priorities, excuse me, to fund immediately. And so the goal is to make sure that we can provide a librarian in every school, and that's what we're actively working towards.
We are also increasing sort of the supply line budgets for every department by 2%. And so there are no cuts to this department. As Dr. Ford Walker said, we're hoping to expand staffing, and the department receives the 2% increase that all the departments receive as well. Who is this one for? You're muted.
That's me. Sorry. Is there a focus on hiring more veteran educators to create more age diversity within the teaching staff? So currently our leaders are engaging in a hiring process that's structured to find and hire and onboard the most qualified candidate for a vacant position. This includes considering educators of all ages and all identities. APS uses a hiring process that's structured to address bias and also prioritizes the use of non-discriminatory practices. And so with that being said, age is not a factor that we can not hire someone for. And it's a practice that we don't use.
I'll note interestingly on this one too, we've actually had more hires of more veteran, more experienced educators in the past couple of years than we did in years previous. And some of that is linked to challenges in the hiring market and in the number of educators leaving preparatory programs. So I would say, in fact, we've hired more veteran educators, more educators with more experience in the past couple of years than is generally typical, because there's not as many educators who are newer to the profession. This is a concern actually that we have in those pools. But as Dr. Ford Walker said, experience is part of what people bring, but not a factor necessarily that is a determinant when it comes to selecting candidates.
Is there any possibility of a second pilot for the EL curriculum rollout at the elementary level rather than full implementation? This is a question that has come up in a few spaces that I've been in, and I just want to be sure that I'm being super clear in terms of the why. The answer is no to this. So we've decided to fully roll out the curriculum across the district next year, and this will allow all of our students to have access to higher quality curriculum sooner. We recognize that the full implementation will increase the amount of support that our educators are in need of. And we've been actively working to try to plan for this and address the support that will be needed so that we can have a successful implementation next year, or full implementation next year. And we'll continue to do that, continue to plan, continue to respond to the feedback that we're getting. Also, last week, our literacy coaches held a Q&A and information session about EL, the curriculum, and also a little bit about the philosophy, and also talked a little bit about some of the lessons learned this year and some of the planning for the full rollout next year. And that is available on the district website. And we can share a link that will take you directly to that video so that you can learn a little bit more about the curriculum if you're interested in doing that. But the goal is to continue with the full rollout next year. Will you be actively improving the elementary school schedule to allow for slightly longer eating times, much longer recess times, spreading out academic subjects throughout the course of the week so that longer blocks of time can be given to each academic subject, and adequate time for specialist subjects as well? So we're currently working on reviewing the elementary schedule and identifying some of the challenges that exist and reviewing how instructional time is used. Right now, there's a small group of leaders who are going to be engaging in a process of really looking at the schedules that exist as they are right now and looking at what instructional time consists of. And we want to make sure that the recommended amount of instructional times are adhered to, and really look at the barriers that currently exist that are preventing adequate instructional time for all subjects, all content areas. Under the leadership of Dr. Sam Hoyo and Caitlin Moran, both of our social studies and science departments have been working to ensure that both social studies and science units are aligned to our new literacy curriculum, or EL units, and that these content areas are also taught in isolation. It's still a goal that science and social studies are still taught once we fully roll out the curriculum next year. Although EL has embedded many different concepts that connected to science and social studies, we do want to make sure that students are also receiving an isolated time for that instruction as well. And again, the goal is to ensure that our students are receiving a well-rounded academic experience.
Okay, I think I'm taking this one. So what benchmarks are you using to identify if APS is improving its two-way communication and providing timely, transparent, relevant, and accessible information specifically to parents of children who receive special education services? So this question's asking sort of writ large, what are the benchmarks we're using, and also how are we making sure that we're paying attention to those benchmarks relative to the experiences of special education students and getting feedback specifically from those families of students who have IEPs. And so we use in the strategic plan, some of the benchmarks that we identified sort of more broadly are our culture and climate surveys, which, as I showed you, do disaggregate by the different focal groups that we have identified. And so we not only use the larger survey data, but we dig down into the individual questions to see where our biggest gaps exist for our students with IEPs and for our families of students who have IEPs. We are constantly, when it comes to students with special education services, at the end of every meeting that happens, IEP meeting that happens, we remind families of a survey. We've created an online version of the survey to receive feedback about how the meeting went, whether or not the families felt included and involved as members of the IEP team. The IEP teams do read those surveys and take that feedback very seriously. We get feedback from most families who participate in the IEP process and have tried to make it as easy as possible for families to fill that survey out. We have a really good relationship with the CPAC and with the leadership of the Arlington CPAC, and we try to collaborate with them as often as possible to bring forums to families that are going to be of interest to the families who are asking for different information about how to support their students and how to collaborate with the district. We also appreciate that they do a survey every year, and sometimes they get different kinds of responses than we might get on ours. And so we share that data back and forth, and we use that to think about what adjustments we can make in our relationships with our families. And we really try to do all we can to listen to the concerns that come to us from the families of students with IEPs, and have included a number of families also in some of the working groups, specifically the one focused on multi-tiered systems of support, to make sure that we are hearing the perspectives of, we also have students who themselves have IEPs in some of the working groups, to make sure that we're focusing on improving the experiences of all of our students. So that'd be that one. Go ahead.
Another question we got is general around how do I get my concerns addressed? There were some specifics, and I just wanted to bring up this kind of flow chart that we have, that when, depending on the concern, who you contact. So things typically related to student specifics, homework, performance, programs, special development, social development, parent-teacher conferences, you would connect directly with your teacher. Things having to do with school safety, discipline matters, school programs, staffing, school policies, directly with your building administrator. So the principal, assistant principal, things related to district policy, curriculum, assessment, and bigger questions like that can be directed straight to central office. Thank you for coming, everyone. And we finished right at 7:52. Plugging in one last time, the Arlington Community Connections Fair on Sunday, April 28th from 12 to 2. It'll be right in the front lobby of Arlington High. Fun things will be happening, so please bring everyone, tell someone about it, and yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you for coming, everybody. It was great to have you live, and we'll send out a recording when we're all done.
Perfect. Yes, the recording will be on the April 1st newsletter that will hit your inboxes on Monday.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Boardwalker and Dr. Thomas and Ms. Pierre.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.